Hello, everyone, and welcome to the future of space. I'm your host, Daniel Fox. Our guest today is Alex Fielding. Alex is the CEO and chairman at Privateer Space and founder at Ripcord. Alex, welcome to the future space.
Thank you for having me, Daniel. It's really a pleasure.
Well, extremely grateful to have you. I understand you're in Hawaii, so aloha and mahalo.
Aloha to you. Yeah, aloha.
Aloha. All right. Alex, before we get into the incredible work that you're doing at Privateer with Steve and Moriba, and we go deep into space philosophy and human experience, could you share with us three words that for you capture the essence of space?
Universal human imperative. And they might look like they go together because they do. But all three are unique
They do.
and interrelated. So I think this is the most human thing that we can do, and we must.
Now, following on that, and it's an extremely good segue, why humans? What is for you the human story of going to space?
It's not just about adventure. It's not just about. I think in this moment, many people have created, and I've fallen into the same trap sometimes, a gap between empathy and apathy. Because when we've thought about space travel, hey, I wasn't alive for the Apollo 11 launch. Okay, I mean, I'm old. Unfortunately, I'm not that old. I just look that old. So, what that means is that I didn't have the privilege of watching the first human step foot on the moon and make that first small step. Or what I think, I mean, I'm sorry to be the person to have broken the news, and Neil luckily isn't alive, unfortunately, to see it. But the giant leap is a little delayed. And nowadays, what maybe that generation really believed were their collective futures now look sometimes like a future for billionaires. And I mean no offense to Jeff Bezos and the wonderful people at Blue Origin, and if you're a billionaire and you go to space wearing a cowboy hat, the world doesn't always relate to billionaires going to space. They must, because they're pushing the market forward. They're making what we do possible, because someone has to draw attention to this, and someone has to make the investment, and that is a leap. It's a leap of faith. But Earth unfortunately has an expiration date, as does our solar system, and we must become a multi-planetary and interplanetary species, and we must ultimately leave here, and we have to take those steps one step at a time, or we'll never get there. We haven't begun to solve the problems on Earth, so we must begin solving these problems in parallel, or we won't make it.
Yeah, just a little parentheses on. I mean, the billionaires have always been part of the equation of these grand innovations or grand risks, right? Back in the days, there were, the aristocrats, the kings and queens, were the ones funding these expeditions to go and find new resources or to push the boundaries. It's just that it was not advertised as much. Like, no one had social media to post, "This is what's happening tomorrow," or even during the when we started to have airplanes and the rich would go and fly. No one was tweeting, "Hey, look at me! This is what I'm flying." But it's always been part of that evolution of these technologies that become ultimately more available to the public. It just now, obviously, there's a lot of media around these personalities that are going up, and I've always said that the job for Bezos and Branson's are not to communicate the experience of going to space. Is to create opportunities for people who can tell those stories to go up to space and bring back and create the human story. And you have part of your partnership, Omega, they understand those relationships. I was talking to Moriba, which was your associate, like the importance of artists to tell the human story, to be able to capture the essence. And maybe that was one of the successes of the Medici on the Renaissance, where you had people with, money and power who understood the necessity to have artists to tell a bigger story than just, the investment. Is that something that, that resonates with you?
Yeah, deeply. I mean, if I were to take you on a tour around our Maui headquarters, you'll find a lot of artwork on the walls, and you'll also find people that we consider inspirations to us. Pioneers in exploration, in space, in a whole bunch of areas, but also across other areas of our humanness. Right? And I think the theme there is that engineering, while many people think engineering, they think guys and girls that kind of are considered geeks. Well, we are, but engineering is this day's highest form of functional art. And if you're doing something important and you're doing something brave and you're doing something that's never been done before, you're an artist and you're making something that anyone can appreciate. We're on a journey together. Um, Not everyone has the same taste in art, but you can still have an appreciation for art that may not be your own taste. In the case of space, the engineering involved is incredibly precise and elegant, and it's one of those areas where precision, which Omega is, of course, I'll do a shameless plug for Omega. Precision is really their thing. They also have something that no other watchmaker on planet Earth has. They have the credit of saving the lives, or helping contribute to save the lives of 3 astronauts on orbit for Apollo 13. And, this is the 52nd anniversary today, October the 5th, of Omega winning the Silver Snoopy Award, the most prestigious award at NASA. And it's a special day for Omega. And it's also a special day for me because even though I'm an Omega ambassador, which is a great privilege, so I get to plug them shamelessly, today is the day that my Silver Snoopy arrived. So on the front of this watch, which no one listening can see, is Snoopy with his little space pack. But on the back, it's the coolest. The back of this watch has an Earth that actually spins. And when Snoopy begins his ride, he's timed, which I wish I could actually show this better. But when I start him, Snoopy is riding on a rocket, and that rocket is going to take 14 seconds, the time of the burn, to go from the lunar gravity to the Earth's gravity and slingshot them home. And this is like, I mean, I'm a child. This is ridiculous, but it's very, very high precision. It's based on the kind of iconic Moonwatch and that history of precision that means so much. So I think engineering and art are absolutely intertwined. And anyone who doesn't believe that engineers are artists, they're meeting with the wrong engineers, because these are art forms that are multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary art forms. And it's a magical time to be able to be a part of it, especially because we know now this moment is critical. Now, most people, they connect the dots looking back. Hindsight is 2020. The world we are living in right now in 2022, this will be looked back upon as the pivotal moment for our humanity traveling to space and becoming an interplanetary species. People are going to look back and say, wow, this was a time of pioneers, and it was truly a frontier. I don't think it's the final frontier, but it's definitely the next one. And we're on an adventure to go there together.
Yeah, I get goosebumps every time I think about that door that we're just opening. The I mean, I often say, I've said it in previous interviews and conversations, up until maybe 5 years ago, if someone had offered me the opportunity to live, for 120, 150, I would be like, nah, I think 100 years on the planet is long enough. But now, today, if someone offered me the opportunity to live up to 500 years old, even if I would be homeless for 400 of them, I would be like, yes. Because we're just about the step that we're about to take as a species on a technology level, on a new awareness, new experience is such a giant leap that's going to create an entire new experience of what it is to be human. Like, it's not just, okay, we'll like tweak the technology of propulsion and it's going to be like a little bit. No, no, no. We're talking that giant step is. I always say, life went from single cell to multi-cell, and it went to the Cambrian evolution, just a giant leap in evolution. And now we're about to go from single planet to multi-planet, and life is about to take another quantum leap of evolution, and we are right at the beginning of it. And it's so exciting. And I know that you're excited too, right?
Oh, I'm so excited. I mean, uh, look, um, Falcon 9 Heavy is pre-Australopithecus, right? This is before Lucy. But Starship is probably Lucy. We're probably at that jumping off part where we begin kind of walking upright as a species. And, um, reusable rockets, more frequent launches, a better cadence, a farther reach. These are just those tiny steps. And we have to make sure at this moment that we don't screw this up for the future of humanity. I think all the time about this, really seriously. It's not some marketing plug. It's not some shameless self ploy. I have a 3-year-old daughter that is the love of my life, and she, every night when we read books together, and when I'm home, when I'm on the island, I don't do business dinners, right? I'm home to cook dinner and be with my daughter and my family. And every night we read books together. She can identify every stage of every rocket going back to, Atlas. She's 3 years old. And when I ask her, and I ask her frequently about what she dreams about, and what would you like to? And I always asking her, would you like to? And the things that she would like to, she would love to go to the moon. She would love to see the other stars. She would love to travel through the heavens. The first word outside of mommy was actually not daddy, it was moon. And every night before bed, she would demand that she see the moon before she went to bed. And my friends used to tease me, they still tease me, what's it like to say no to your daughter? And I told them, I don't know, I'll let you know when it happens, right? But I want her to have any opportunity that her heart desires. And whatever we do right now, we're on the verge of either screwing this up horribly or getting it right completely. And the fine line between the two is very, very, very thin. And I don't think people most, I don't think most of the public knows how fragile our space ecosystem is. And I know, your conversation with Moriba, he's the Greta von Thunberg of space. Okay, Moriba. When I first met Moriba Ja, he was a space heretic for saying words like space debris and space trash. And as a heretic, he was effectively Copernicus. Most of the community wanted him dead. He was going against the status quo. And 5 years later, he became much closer to Galileo. Speaking of the Medicis, he went straight into basically house arrest with the Medicis. No longer was a death warrant out for him. He just needed to have some good friends and go into hiding. And now it's clear that his vision was unfortunately correct. His assumptions and his predictions were remarkably terrifyingly accurate. And now he's becoming more mainstream, and people are finally hearing the message for what it is, which is that we must not do to space, especially near Earth space, where we're most in danger, what we've done to the land and to the ocean and to our own atmosphere on planet Earth. We're very, very close. And we now have to solve these global challenges, and you can't solve a global challenge as a nation. You have to solve a universal challenge as a universe. So we have to work together. And today, hey, while I'm celebrating, I woke up this morning very excited to celebrate that my silver Snoopy watch had just arrived, and as a small child inside my heart, I was very excited. And then I turned on the news, and I became very devastated. Right, I think along with most of the rest of planet Earth, watching the situation unfold between North Korea and the rest of the world, and we're all behaving in a way that we would not behave at a dinner party if we were to sit down and have this as a conversation. We're behaving closer to how internet trolls behave, which is not the way humans behave when we talk to and treat each other as humans in a conversation. Instead, we're misinterpreting each other's intent, and we're responding to our own fears and bigotry and arrogance and ignorance. And the only way to solve those things are with knowledge and with understanding and with compassion and with a conversation. And instead, we're stupidly and shamefully doing this with missiles and with banging our chests and asserting kind of acts of aggression, which is really terrifying. So I'm deeply hopeful, because I don't want to screw this up for my daughter, or for any future generation. But we have to solve these things. People always assume. I think it's hysterical, because there's many brilliant people who are also kind of I'm not a visionary, right? I can see. I can kind of see down the board a little bit, but the visionaries in space, many of them say that the aliens that exist out there, they either don't exist, or when they find us, they'll just accidentally mow us over and kill us, because they must clearly be kind of in a war-minded mentality. But this is actually bringing an assumption that they were able to become an interplanetary, interstellar species by being war fighting and warmongers. My assumption is totally opposite. I think if the aliens are out there, and I'm assuming that there's much more advanced civilizations than ours, that they likely put the types of petty things that we're going through right now well behind them, because they needed to work together to get to where they got. And those that behave the way we're behaving now probably are on the verge of doing what we could accidentally do, which is wipe ourselves out entirely from this planet by effectively not understanding how to work together. And maybe that's a part of the evolution of our humanness. Right? Maybe what comes out the next generation and the generation after are people who are better at communicating, and are better at loving each other, and better at understanding each other. Because if you don't have those qualities, we'll never survive together. We probably, survival of the fittest may mean survival of the most peaceful. And maybe that's totally naive and stupid and crazy of me to feel that way, but I can't imagine. And it feels backward, because you look at the Cold War and the evolution of technology through the Cold War, and you look at what we're doing now, which in a weird way is now Cold War version 2. Still involves space, still involves a race, maybe even more terrifying in some ways in terms of capability of the countries involved. But these things are not the things that are actually driving the evolution of our near-Earth space environment today. They're a byproduct of the left getting further left and the right getting further right, when the bulk of us are in the gray area in between. And I am deeply, deeply hopeful that we find a path forward that is peaceful, so that we can resolve this while we work together to solve human scale challenges, universal challenges, not petty disagreements and war fighting. This is this is the great issue in space today. The bulk of the assets that go into space today are launched by commercial companies, right? They're launched. It's SpaceX and others who do a great job. the bulk of the spend is still government. And the government is not spending the bulk of the money on peace. So the problem is, if you look at the companies that are the beneficiaries, and I'm not talking about SpaceX and Blue and Astra and Rocket and Firefly and all the launch companies. I'm not talking about the launch companies. If you look at the big defense contractors, the military industrial complex that receives so much money from so many governments around the world, now we're working on issues of universal global imperatives. How do we solve our conflicts? Going to those same companies as governments is ludicrous. It would be like going to your drug dealer and saying, I'd like to get off of crack. Your drug dealer is trying to sell you drugs. Why would a military industrial arms dealer want you to be at peace? They're probably the wrong people to write checks to. So this is a problem that is compounded by the war machine being fueled, even with the best intentions, right? So anyway, I didn't mean to rant endlessly on this, but I feel very, very strongly and very passionately that we should not continue investing in military capability for peace. That is insane, right? That's like deciding you want to clean up planet Earth by investing in a landfill company. Like there's a massive conflict of interest actually between the two. And so we must begin working in the private sector and with humans with the best intentions and companies with the best intentions to solve problems that are so huge.
I think that the privateer is a great example of that. There are many other companies that are taking leadership into building these foundations of that future that a lot of the space is envisioning. And for me, this is, when I went to the National Archives in Washington, D.C., and you realize the vision that America represented, when they left Europe and they built this country with these values that are just, I mean, the effort and the dedication that went into, and it wasn't like a straight line. There was huge conflicts, and they paid it with their tears and blood to build that vision. And space is that next opportunity of taking these values that now have become important to us and understanding how we want to live with our environment, and now taking it to the other place. We don't want to, I mean, obviously it's easy, like you said, in hindsight to look back and say, well, these things were not necessarily the best. But for me, it's always important. Like, I don't believe in judging the past with today's understanding or values, because no one in the past wakes up. I mean, the vast majority of people, they don't wake up trying to do bad things. They try to do the best things considering the priorities and the knowledge and technology that they have. And then at one point, they realize that it didn't work, or it doesn't work, or it worked and it doesn't work no more. And you readjust. Unfortunately, life is messy by design, because a path in innovation is the same as a mistake. The only difference is one was a success and then the other one was a mistake. But in that process, you were trying to do the same thing. And right now, when you look, whether it's a trajectory of an artist, or even our society as or evolution, from a macro perspective, you have this like nice little curve going up, and things, seems to be really smooth. But the closer you get, the more jagged it is, and it's a messy. Life is messy. There's ups and downs, and even in love, before you, even in your marriage, in your relationship, you're with your children, within your family, it's there's discord, there's conflict, but ultimately at one point you find a certain foundation to deal with those conflict in a human way, in a way that is constructive and not destructive. And I'm totally agree with you in this idea that if there are, I mean, other life form in the universe, not that there are life form in the universe. That no doubt about that. Intelligent life, life that's a different and intelligent that I have the capacity to also to get into build a spaceship. If you get to that space, to that place, you also have an understanding of trying to resolve conflict in a more peaceful manner than just to war your way out of in the world, because I think that there's an evolution and of awareness that goes with it. So I agree with you, because it is also my understanding of, once we find life or other species, it won't be just like, oh, let's beat ourselves up to see what happens. There's going to be this curiosity and this desire to communicate and to find, rather than just, oh, let's attack and see who's going to last. But I wanted to, just before I ask you one more question, you reminded me of when I did my solo wilderness expeditions, and I would go out into places that I've never been. I would purposely put myself surrounded by people that view world from a different perspective, they experience life from a different perspective, they experience nature in a different way. And it was always part of my strategy to find myself living with them and dining and sitting at the table and sharing a meal with them. Because when you sit at the table and when you start to share stories, you start to realize that we're all the same. We all want to be valued. We all want to be recognized. We all want to be loved. We want to put food on the table, and we want to send our children to school and give them a future. We all start from the same place. And then after that, things get complicated. But at that table, when we share bread and when we toast a glass of wine, it is just the essence of the human experience, and you get to be reminded of the connectivity that we are, as opposed to just shouting things on internet, where because you don't have that connection, the human connection. But and it's I mean, you have a child that now sees space has a reality. It's no more science fiction. She is growing up with the understanding that this is a reality. It must be something quite special to see the world evolve through those eyes, right?
Oh, it's the greatest thing in the world. I mean, we talk about machine learning and artificial intelligence, but human learning and real intelligence trumps machine learning and artificial intelligence at this moment in time, trumps it millions of times over. And my daughter, watching Discovery, watching her see things through her eyes for the first time and be excited by things that I have, shamefully become accustomed to, uh, becoming an old man. It's it's a totally different experience, and it shines a new perspective and priority on not messing that up. Because, just as you wouldn't go to your drug dealer for rehab and you wouldn't go to your arms dealer to make peace, the world that we're living in with these types of conflicts, like you said, in any relationship, the number one thing is, just like evolution with relationships, you either grow or you die. And growth is tricky. It's not a straight line. We wish it was, right? But there's ups and there's downs, and that road, you hope you go to the same destination. I mean, we all are sharing the same collective destination, but as you hope that the road on the journey to get there is something meaningful. We all want to make meaning in our lives. When we start companies, I think this is my own observation, is that those companies that survive and become companies that we look back on or that we look forward to and we say, that's a great company. That's an amazing thing that they've accomplished, whoever they are. The number one thing becomes, why did they do what they did? And you'll meet people who will say money, but great companies were never built because people wanted money. That's maybe great fortunes. I mean, maybe if that's what you really crave, maybe that's what you'll really get. But great companies and great missions are about why you do something, not what you're doing, not how you're doing it. It's not about the tactics, it's about your strategy and your heart. And if your mission isn't connected to your heart and people don't understand it and they can't connect with those values, you're nowhere. Um, even my last company, Ripcord, which I'm still an employee and I'm on the board of, which I'm very proud of. We started that at NASA 8 years ago, almost, in a broom closet, an asbestos-filled broom closet at NASA Ames Research Center. And when we decided to start that as a group of friends, we asked ourselves why. Why must we do this? I mean, nobody wakes up and says, I have to start a company. I mean, especially not when you're doing other things, right? It's a major commitment to take the risks that you take when you start a young company, because none of them, statistically or probabilistically, no startup company should succeed. Because you're generally going up against incumbents with giant checkbooks if there's a market, and they're doing things that they're very good at because they have a lot of customers. That's why they built a market. And 85% of young companies fail in the first 18 months, which is the great riddle of venture capital, right? The 15% that survive, maybe 5%. So a third of those 15% return what you put into them, which is now nothing. And then the remainder has to knock it out of the park. What makes them successful? I am convinced it's why. When we sat in that room together and we started Ripcord, we started with the mission of, could we take what we had? Vision guided robots. Okay. So we had a hammer, everything looks like a nail. When you have vision guided robots and our hearts ask the question, what about the total knowledge of human history? Where is it? We only have 25 years of Google. So what about the rest? What about everything going back to the incunables? What about the stuff that we can't reference or search or find? How do we bring the emerging world forward? How do we level the playing field for education? We sat in that room and we didn't have a conversation about how do you make the technology work. We had an idea of how we could. It was it was nearly it was borderline difficult to impossible, but our hearts, everyone in the room, said this is why we must do it. We must take the total knowledge of human history and make it searchable and accessible to all of humanity. That's why we're doing this. Now, everything else is how we're doing it. Do we agree on why we must do it? Okay, our hearts, that's not a mission statement you need to write down and put on a wall. I'm not even at the company full time anymore, and my heart still connects with the mission of that company that I'm still a giant cheerleader for, maybe by volume. And when we started Privateer, it was no different. When Woz called me and said, we must do this, the mission was to make sure that space became and remained safe and accessible for humanity. Now, everything that we do to make sure that space is safe and accessible for our humanity, our humanness, globally, universally, the rest of it are details. It's such a large problem that, just like the problem that we sought out to solve at Ripcord with Privateer, the odds of us solving this in my lifetime are very low. We'll still be on the path. But we have to be on the path so we don't screw this up. And we all have to be aligned that that's the right thing to do. And then we need to keep our hearts aligned so we don't do the wrong things for the wrong reasons. I know Google's mission statement early was kind of do no harm, right? But you almost have to go beyond that to do some good. And that's our deepest hope, is that we find a way to close these gaps so that we can determine each other's intent, so we can communicate more effectively, so that we can operate and interoperate in space safely as a humanity. Now, the rest of it, don't get me wrong, we have to make money. We're not a nonprofit organization. But all of those things must connect to our core values. And if they don't, no matter how great it would be to go do some amazing project that someone's going to give us a giant check to do, we will not do it. And it creates confusion and friction and strife, because many of the things, if you go to Privateer's website today, the conjunction analysis, the things that help us prevent crashing in space, the conjunction data messages that help operators not crash into each other, the ephemeris data, these things are all downloadable for free. Now, could you operate your constellation on them? If you have a couple satellites, yeah, you could operate on Wayfinder. If you had a large constellation, you'll have to subscribe to our APIs and that type of thing to operate your constellation. But can you view and fuse data together from many countries in Wayfinder? Yeah. I mean, today is the bad day to mention it, but the Russian data from Vimpel is in our catalog and it's displayable on Wayfinder today. And you need to take data from everyone who will share with you so that we can begin to close these gaps. Now, we're not buying that data. They're contributing the data, right? And there's other countries that are also in conflict with each other that are beginning to provide these data into this platform. It opens the door and the conversation so that we can begin to close these gaps in our knowledge and in how we communicate and treat each other. Because right now, space, it's based on maritime law from the 1500s, right? So, and it's not even as good. We don't have the notion of things like right of way. If my satellite is heading towards your satellite, which one of us should move? Are we going to play chicken? Right now, there's actually not a law that one of us is in the right of way. I don't know your capability. I don't know how fast you can maneuver. I don't know how much fuel you have. You don't know that about me. Because governments, because of this war fighting, it's really largely fear. Which, fear, the only way to overcome fear is understanding. And until we open up these barriers so that we can share these data, then we can determine intent. And I'm totally in agreement with you. Most people have good intent. The interpretation of that intent, especially when we don't communicate well, and I communicate horribly, and I married a therapist, right? So I'm learning. She still takes notes on me from time to time about how poor my communication is. If we can't communicate more clearly and effectively, we're doomed. At the very least, we're doomed to repeat the same mistakes we've made. And this is a time, and I don't mean to be negative, because I'm actually an optimist. I mean, if I wasn't an optimist, I wouldn't be on the mission we're on. This is the time when we must make these changes. And people think that, oh yeah, things that are happening here on the ground in planet Earth are going to influence space, and they certainly are. But everyone who's ever gone to space talks about their perspective shifting to a macro global perspective in an instant. It's an epiphany. I didn't marry my own therapist, but if anyone who's listening to this has ever been in therapy, and I still have a therapist, and God knows I have plenty to work on. When I talk to that person, there's moments. Anyone who's ever been to therapy has a moment where a blind spot is uncovered that is blatantly obvious the minute that you now know it. It doesn't mean you can fix it. Knowing why doesn't mean you can fix it, which is quite frustrating. But at least when it happens, you almost feel your brain reboot. And that reboot is now happening in what we're doing at each step of space. And that macro perspective, that global world perspective, it's not about winning and losing. It's not a game. It is not a contest. It is not a competition. We are really in this thing together as humans. And I mean, I'm not trying to leave out the canines and the elephants and the dolphins and everything else. We're in this together, and our survival is dependent on us getting past these petty frictions and getting beyond this ridiculous kind of machismo and war fighting, and I'm I don't think that this is I don't think that this is, well, unknown, but hey, we are wired differently. Everyone has got their own triggers. The biggest trigger, the biggest trigger is fear. If you've ever watched like Dog Whisperer with Caesar Milan, the most interesting episode for me was when Caesar Milan, who every time you turn on the television, there he is, and there's a pit bull, and there's a Rottweiler, and he's got a tennis racket, and he's doing some ninja maneuver, and all of a sudden they've become teddy bears, and they're all loving him, and they're licking his face. The most interesting episode for me was when he was bitten multiple times and taken down by two golden retrievers. Now, why, why tell this story? Um, because our perceptions and what makes a dog bite someone. Do you think it's an angry dog? Probably not. It's probably fear. Fear is the most dangerous thing in our nature. It's more dangerous than anger. It's certainly more dangerous than love. Fear is the most dangerous thing we have in our humanity, and we have to overcome it with understanding. And understanding can only exist through communication and open communication with actual knowledge, right? Um, you know, Understanding comes after knowledge. You can know something by reading it. You don't understand it until you've tried it, right? I mean, anybody who's ever tried art, I'll give you a really dumb example. I fly helicopters. Okay, I read every book. I played with every simulator, and then I stepped foot in a cockpit and I got my hands on the controls. And let me tell you, you can read every book, and until you're actually hovering a helicopter for the first time, you don't have understanding. You have the knowledge. I know what everything does. You don't have the understanding until you've tried it and applied your knowledge. In the world we're talking about with space, we must do that now. I think we have the knowledge. We know that breaking down fear, we can share the data, we can share the information, we can ultimately share the knowledge. But until we actually, like you said, sit down and break bread and express our mutual humanness with each other, we won't have the understanding of the perspective, and we won't overcome the ignorance and the bigotry of not understanding each other's cultures. This is and it's one of the reasons I'm so blessed to work with Steve Wozniak and Moriba Ja. I mean, one, because when you work with two people that are that brilliant and that visionary, I look like the sane person amongst us, which is great. And it's also a beautiful experience because both of them have hearts that are completely aligned with our mission. Woz doesn't need to make another dime. Okay, I mean, he'll be fine. Moriba did not decide to take on a commercial venture for the first time in his adult career because he wanted to make a couple of bucks. Right? These are things that are connected with our hearts and where we want humanity to be. This is not about, it's not purely about some balance sheet. And our investors, thankfully, are fantastic, and they have not only similar minded hearts, but they believe that if we accomplish what we accomplish, we will win. And we will win financially as well as for the goodness of what we're trying to accomplish. These things shouldn't be misaligned. This is, and it's depressing. I'm depressed. I shouldn't actually say this, but the U.S. government is to blame for an awful lot of this. And what I mean by that is that, and I love my country. I love my home. I love that I have been adopted by the island of Hawaii, because you don't adopt an island. An island either adopts you or it throws you off. And the people in Hawaii are the most lovely, wonderful people. They've adopted us as a company. Now, why am I upset with what's going on with U.S. government? Because these posturings, these activities, these hostile responses, measured response is not how you fix something. sanctions for an unsanctionable nation are not something that fix anything, right? I mean, you tell me what we import from North Korea. Whatever it is, I wasn't buying it already, so the sanctions don't matter. Um, all that these are doing is posturing and creating a bigger divide in communication, which is resulting in additional friction. And it's not about political party, right? This is not some type of. If anyone who's ever met Moriba or Waz or myself or anyone on, I can't speak for everyone on Team Privateer, but I know Moriba and Waz very, very well. We are politically agnostic. I mean, you vote for people who you trust and who you think their heart is in the right place. And you hope that their policy aligns with their heart. And then everything will work out just fine. This is about, again, it comes down to you don't ask your drug dealer for rehab. You cannot go to arms dealers and ask them to buy peace because they will not sell it to you. It's against their best interests. And the US government in space, we have a chance to enable a community to open up the ideas and open up the intent and open up the data sharing to create this knowledge and understanding. You can't do that through a company that makes missiles and war implements for a living because no one will trust them outside of you. You might trust your own arms dealer. The other person won't. So I am frustrated by that specifically. And, in our administration now, we have this thing called National Space Policy Directive 3, which says that we will provide a global framework for space traffic management for free. Well, who the heck is going to use it if it comes from an arms dealer and it's closed? It has to be open and participatory, especially for those nations that we feel conflict with, or we'll never be able to sit at that table and share bread. We have.
It's like Facebook trying to make themselves trusty and so,
Yeah. I mean, can you this is it's interesting, right? This is even and I don't want to go down a political rabbit hole, but being in Hawaii. Hawaii was the first U.S. state to legally allow legal safe abortion. Okay, so I've already gone down a political rabbit hole I'm not supposed to. But in Hawaii, there's a notion of hanai, and to hanai means effectively it's a literal but also a figurative form of adoption. When you meet people in Hawaii and they're your elders and you respect them, they're your aunties and your uncles. Okay, because we live on an island. When there's someone who you love and you care about, and you share bread with them, or fish, or whatever you share with them, you have the notion of being able to adopt them into your family, to hanai them. Now that sounds like really okay, flowery, aloha, yes. Well, these things are real and alive. And if we took this approach and we could share it with the rest of the world, it's so critical. When being here during the pandemic, when we turned on the television from Hawaii, what we saw were people on the mainland rioting, looting, protesting, angry, terrified, sad. We saw a lot of friction. We saw people hoarding toilet paper and vandalizing things. And when you have people at the edge of poverty, afraid about how they're going to feed their family and how they're going to keep a roof over their head and have shelter, of course, the fear can result in bad things, right? We live on an island that all of a sudden had no tourists because travel was shut down. What did we see in Hawaii? We saw three magic things that I never would have imagined in my adult life. One, the farmer still had to farm because you have to actually harvest crops and plant things. So what happened to all the fresh vegetables and fruits on the island? The companies here bagged them up, took volunteers, and every day of the week You could roll your window down, put a mask on, and get a bag of fresh produce grown on the island, because now there was more than enough. Normally there needs to be enough for all the tourists. Now you just need enough for the people that live on the island. The fishermen, turns out, commercial fishermen, fisherwomen, fisher people like going fishing. They kept fishing, not at the same level because they don't need to sell to hotels and resorts. Many of them did the same thing. They caught those fish, they brought them back, they filleted them, they put them on ice, and they donated them in the form of drive-by, no question asked, here is fresh fish. We also live on an island with a deer population that's invasive. 2 million deer for 250,000 people. Guess what? The hunters can't sell it. So they continued to harvest a certain number of deer humanely, because otherwise these deer will starve or go thirsty to death. So it's actually the humane thing to do. And they delivered that in the same way. The banks gave a loan forgiveness program. Bank of Hawaii had a program that effectively, I mean, this is the general construct, said, if you can't pay your mortgage, don't pay it. We won't report it to the credit bureau, and up to 12 months, take as much time as you want. If you need to miss a month, 2 months, 3 months, don't write us a letter, don't fill out a form, just don't pay it. We'll add those payments to the back of your amortization schedule. So we'll get paid eventually. But for the next year, we know everyone here is hurting. 70% unemployment on the islands of Hawaii, the highest unemployment in the country. Did we have any crime? No. Did we have any violence? No. Why? People weren't worried about feeding their family. They weren't worried about losing their house. And the craziest thing is, if you talk to those banks that did these programs, they were not loan forgiveness programs. The stock market punished the public banks in Hawaii for doing this, because they said, what you're doing is you're just pretending that there's not going to be foreclosures. You're just delaying the inevitable, because the people who can't afford to pay their mortgage were going to lose their houses. Guess what happened? The people who used the program, who needed it, the average number of months they took was 7. And then they began paying, even though the island was still shut down. The average number of months where someone delayed or deferred their mortgage was 7 months. The mortgage default rate in the state of Hawaii is 0. Everyone went back to work, went back to paying. And if you ask people here, why do you think that is? Why do you think it is that as neighbors, as a family, we fed each other? We took care of each other. We largely looked out for each other. Was the money coming in? No. Did you need money for these things? Not really. If you help each other, you don't. Why did people go back to paying their mortgage so quickly? Why didn't they take the whole year? If the bank says delay a year and you're hurting for money, why not take a year? The answer most people gave was, my bank didn't screw me over. Why would I screw it over? Fairness.
We go we go back to the why, right? It's always, you're talking earlier about the why of the company, and I think that, like, every time, like, I've been listening to you, and the theme that keeps coming back is the stories we tell ourselves. Why, like, how do we shape the world around us? And I think that part of the challenge that we have right now is that the story that we've created comes from a place of righteousness and is extremely aggressive. And even from the environmental world, the story that they shaped and keep repeating is not inspiring for a lot of people. It keeps saying, it's like, we're a bad species. If we were not on Earth, nature would be so much better. For people that are just trying to put food on the table and try to send their children to school, like, it's almost like insulting. And as we go to space, shaping the story of not obviously going to space at the expense of Earth, but going over there to elevate Earth, to elevate everything. And this is what I'm really, people like me are trying to do, is really to reshape the narrative around us, so that we don't divide, we don't segment, but we try to, the same thing that I've done with Field the Wild and nature. There's not nature and human species. There's life, right? And we're part of it. And we're it's, we're elevating nature. We're the worst of nature. We're the best of nature, but we're participating in this dynamic of life, moving life forward. And going to space is nothing. That's why I want to tell the nature story of going to space, because nature life is going where we're taking it, and life is taking us. But anyway, Alex, I feel like we could go,
Yeah.
go for a long time,
Well, and
and maybe I just need to come to Hawaii so that we can kind of like have a proper dinner or a proper day, and then just like have a full on live future
look,
space.
I think what we do is we take. I don't know if you've seen the show Naked and Afraid, right?
No. Oh yes, yeah, yeah.
So we should do an opposite. We should do clothed and perfectly comfortable. This is,
Absolutely.
this is where you trap yourself on an island with lovely people and fantastic ideas, and you see how long it takes before someone must leave. And maybe we can spin this narrative, because I think the if I were to summarize our discussion today, I would say what matters the most is people's hearts, and the ability for people to take that intention and bring it into the world in a positive way. And in space, by and large, the commercial companies operating, by and large, the intention, and you've met with most of the most inspirational space leaders on planet Earth, the intention is good. Now, the question is, how do we not screw that up? How do we make sure that what we project into the world as true positive intention is not only received and interpreted the way that it's meant, because that can always there can always be a gap there, many times accidental, right? How do we do that? And how do we as a space community, which is a global, universal community, come back to this idea of kind of peace and prosperity for everyone? I mean, this is don't get me wrong. I'm not going to become like Leonard Nimoy here, but well, and I mean, rest his soul. But I do think that this is a universal human imperative for space, and for those people who want to know why, it's for the future of our civilization, and more than the civilization, it's for all of us who share and cohabitate this planet and have aspirations to continue to live peacefully together. And I mean, I hope to heck that this results in less of what we're watching on the news today.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Alex, the on your just before the we wrap this up, on your LinkedIn, you said that Privateer Space is hiring. So if people are want to be part of this story that you're building and the why that you've created at Privateer, I guess they go on the website or they reached out to you on LinkedIn. What's the best way to connect?
Yeah, most of those jobs are posted, but if you go to mission.privateer.com, which is more tied to the why are we doing this, there's also a way to contact us and reach out on any of those jobs. You could also go through the job boards where they're posted and just apply directly. But we are hiring. For a small startup, we have employees in 12 states in the United States and one in Europe, our first European employee. And so hopefully many more to come soon. But we are moving forward and expanding as quickly as we can. And I think we want to work with people who feel the way we do, but don't look and think the way we do. Right? A diversity of people and a diversity of opinions is what makes things great. And I'm very proud that there is plenty of disagreement and plenty of a wonderful collegiate debate inside Privateer about how you do the things you do. There's pretty much no debate about why we do the things we do. And I would be very, very grateful for people who feel that way to come and join us and bring their brilliance and talent to our team so we can do really great things together, which is so important to all of us.
Well, we'll make sure that all the links and the proper places to go are in the description. And in the meantime, you and I, listen, I'm booking my flight to Hawaii.
Come on
Like,
out.
I'm coming over and I want to meet your daughter. And I know that my wife is going to fall in love with your daughter. And I want to hear about her telling that she's going to the moon and she's going to Mars. And to experience that vision of the future. There's no more, science fiction, but a reality through the eyes and the mind of a 3-year old. I think like that needs to be experienced. Alex, thank you so very much.
Oh, thank you, Daniel. This has been a huge privilege and a true pleasure, and I can't wait. Come to Maui. Come to our little headquarters, our humble headquarters in the middle of the South Pacific. Would love to have you, and would love to.
It's a date.
And my daughter can give us both an education on the things that she's learning that I'm very excited to learn all over again.
Excellent. Looking forward.
Me too. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex.
Aloha.